Yes, there was. It was maybe 100 feet. Sometimes the parade, some groups go a little bit slower or faster than others. After the Dancing Grannies, there's a street to the left that he could have exited on. And then there was a number of groups that were up about 100 feet.
Okay. And they were in the 400 block of West Main Street?
Correct.
Did he then encounter the group known as the Catholic Community of Waukesha?
Yes, he did.
And that was a larger group, correct?
Yes, it was.
Did Mr. Brooks strike several members of that group with his vehicle?
Yes, he did.
A total of about 19 people injured with the Catholic community?
Yes.
Okay. And they were all in the roadway?
Yes, they were.
Aside from the people in the roadway marching in the parade, there were some spectators that were injured in the area of 5 Points, is that correct?
Yes, there were.
And also some others that have been injured west of that, near the area where the Dancing Grannies were struck, correct?
Correct.
After Mr. Brooks went through the Catholic community group, did the video show where he went from there?
Yes, at that point the roadway curves southbound for a short time until Wisconsin Avenue, and he turned left at that point.
Okay, so he stays on the parade route?
Correct.
And does he encounter an officer in this area of West Avenue?
Yes, he did.
What happened there?
One of our officers saw the vehicle coming at him. This officer was standing directly in the roadway. The vehicle was driving directly at him and forced that officer to discharge his service weapon.
He fired at Mr. Brooks' vehicle?
Yes, he did.
Did he strike the vehicle?
3 times.
Did the vehicle stop?
Did not.
Where did the vehicle go?
Continued southbound. At that point, the roadway turns into West Avenue. He continued for a block and then turned left onto Prospect Avenue.
And were you later able to trace the path of travel for the vehicle after it left the parade route?
Yes, we were.
Where did it go?
The vehicle pulled into a driveway and then through a backyard and ended up at 338 Maple Avenue.
What happened there?
Mr. Brooks got out of the vehicle and began running southbound.
So he abandons the vehicle?
Yes.
And now he's on foot?
Correct.
Were you able to determine where he went?
He went to multiple different locations. Eventually, he was taken into custody at 553 Elizabeth Street.
Okay. At any point, did Mr. Brooks return to the parade route to check on any of these victims that had been struck?
Never.
In viewing the video, were there occasions where you observed the vehicle increase its speed along the parade route?
Yes, there was.
Okay. And that was at a time when there were multiple people in the road, correct?
Correct.
Fair to say that from the video that most of the parade participants, because Mr. Brooks was coming up from behind them, were not aware of what was going on.
That is correct.
And it appeared from the video that most of them were struck without even knowing he was approaching them with his car.
Correct.
Just one last matter, Mr. Detective Casey, did we make any effort to determine the functionality of the vehicle after the incident had occurred?
Yes, we have.
What happened?
We had the Wisconsin State Patrol Mechanical Inspection Unit do an inspection on the vehicle while it was at the Wisconsin State Crime Lab.
And what was determined?
It was determined that there is nothing on the vehicle that was defective that would make the vehicle so it would not stop or accelerate. They found that a tie rod end had a little bit of extra play in it, and there was one mismatched tire. Other than that, they did not find anything mechanical wrong with the vehicle.
Okay. And are you aware of the fact that Mr. Brooks was pending on 2 open cases in Milwaukee County at the time of this incident?
Yes, I am.
Are you aware that he had been released on bail in those cases and had been ordered to not commit any further crimes?
Yes, I am.
All right. Thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Thank you. Attorney Keys? Thank you, Your Honor. So, Detective Casey, you indicated on direct examination that there were thousands of people in the area for the parade on that afternoon. Is that correct?
That is my estimate.
You said about 100 entries in the parade completely.
Correct.
About hundreds of participants were participating in the parade, actually walking down the street, correct?
Correct.
And then you said there were thousands of people then spectating in addition to all of the participants, correct?
That is my estimate.
You indicated also a little bit about the route description. So you stated that the staging area is up on White Rock Avenue. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so White Rock was blocked off from some street all the way down through Maine. Is that correct?
I believe that it was blocked off starting at Niagara, which is north of where White Rock School is, where he was initially in the fight with victim PPP.
Okay. And then the parade goes from White Rock onto Maine. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then it continues turning onto Wisconsin Avenue once it gets to the end of that corner of Main Street, correct?
Correct.
Now, you indicated that there were barricades and squad cars blocking off that street, correct?
What specific street are you talking
Blocking
about?
off Main Street so that the people can't get onto Main Street from the cross streets, correct?
So vehicles can't get on, correct.
Right. And so you indicated, you said the words, I think, squads and barricades, correct?
Correct.
So what does that mean exactly? Were there squad cars actually blocking the cross streets on Main Street?
At different locations, yes.
So was there a squad car at every single cross street?
There should have been, yes. It may not have been directly on the route. Sometimes they position them maybe a block up, so the vehicles can't get to the route, like the street that is like a block away. And then at the street itself, they would have plastic barricades that are about 10 feet long with white and orange on them.
Okay. So there was not necessarily a squad car blocking the cross street, but there was at least an orange and white barrier.
Correct.
And if someone had gone through the orange and white barrier, they would have then confronted a squad that was blocking another street. Is that fair to say?
More than likely, yes.
Now, you indicated that there were lots of spectators and that people were lining the sidewalks. Is that correct?
Yes.
Were there people who were sitting on the street, on the cross streets in front of the barricades as well?
At some of the places, yes.
So that if someone had turned from Main Street onto a cross street, they could have confronted people before getting to a barricade. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
Now, this is a parade, right? So it's loud. There's lots of activity and music and people talking. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say.
And you were describing before on direct examination that there were some gaps between groups of participants. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So there's different groups of participants who are walking down the street, correct?
Correct.
And there's an amount of space between each group, correct?
I won't necessarily say each group, but some groups, some are closer. Every once in a while, there's a group that's a little bit slower than the other group, and it allows a space. So I wouldn't say every group, but some groups there are.
So there are spots where there's nobody walking, correct?
Correct.
And when there are those spots where there's nobody actually walking in the street, there are still spectators on the side of the street, perhaps on the sidewalk, sitting on the curb, things like that, correct?
Correct.
Now, you indicated that you first observed this red Ford Escape on White Rock Avenue, correct?
Correct.
So it was driving toward you as you were standing near the intersection of Main and White Rock, is that right?
Correct.
And then you indicated on direct examination that it had contact with you, correct?
Correct.
You didn't get run over, did you?
I did not.
You then observed that vehicle continue on through Main Street, and you described all of that. And then you indicated that it turned southbound onto, does it turn into west there? Or is that still Main
It's
Street?
Main Street for a very short time, and then south of Wisconsin Avenue, it's West Avenue.
Okay. And so the vehicle then did not continue onto Wisconsin Avenue to follow the parade route, correct?
Correct.
The vehicle continued southbound across Wisconsin Avenue, correct?
Correct.
And then you indicated that it turned off onto a different street that I can't remember.
Prospect Avenue.
Prospect, thank you. So it did not continue then following the parade once it got to the end of Main Street, is that correct?
That is correct.
Now, in describing this red Ford Escape, was it an older model, a newer model?
2010.
2010, okay. And when you were having contact with this vehicle, did you notice that the windows were up or down?
I believe that they were all up.
So all the windows were closed on this Ford Escape, is that correct?
Correct.
So you could not see inside through an open window, is that correct? You would have been looking through the glass.
Correct.
The windows were not cracked open at all.
Not that I recall.
And when you were next to the vehicle, you could hear the engine noise, is that correct?
I mean, I don't recall hearing that. I mean, I don't know if it's because everything else that was going on that was excluded, but I don't really recall any noises. I was focused on the vehicle and the driver of the vehicle at that point.
Okay. Now, you indicated that both yourself and officer, is it Butrin or Buttrin?
Yes.
All right, Officer B, is you and Officer B were head-on with the vehicle, is that correct?
That is correct.
And you indicated, in fact, that you were eye-to-eye with the driver of the vehicle, is that correct?
Yes.
And you were right next to the window, and so was Officer Buttrin at a later date, is that correct?
It wasn't a later time. It was probably a few minutes later. I believe he was directly in front of the vehicle. I was in front of the vehicle and then off to its side.
Okay. And regarding the driver, as you saw the driver as it was going past you, he was wearing a gray sweatshirt, correct?
I know that later, but at that time, I was focused on his face. That's all that I saw. I did not see a sweatshirt. I know later that from looking at video and other things, that he was wearing a gray sweatshirt.
Okay. And so when you're looking at his face, you couldn't see his hair at all, correct?
I saw that he had dark hair and he had some facial hair.
Okay. But you couldn't see, like, the length of his hair, is that correct?
I personally did not see that.
Because it was covered up with a hood, is that correct?
I was just focused on his face. I mean, I was just zeroed in on his face. That's all that I was looking at. It happened very fast. I was very orientated on his face. I do not recall seeing that. It's probably because of things were happening very fast, and I wanted to remember his face, so I was focusing on that.
Okay. And so you indicated on direct examination that you actually stepped in front of the vehicle and pounded on the hood and
Yes.
yelled for the driver to stop, correct?
Yes.
And you did not end up underneath the vehicle, is that correct?
I did not. The vehicle was driving at a slow speed at that time, and I was able to step off to the side as it brushed me past.
And then you witnessed the vehicle driving for how long, did you say? Until about Barstow?
That's how far I could see it. The vehicle started to pick up speed, and then it was getting too far away from me, and I decided it was best to go back to my squad car and get into there to try to pursue the vehicle further.
Okay. And then Officer Buttrin, you indicated, observed the vehicle as well. Do you know how long Officer Buttrin was able to personally observe the vehicle drive?
I mean, it would have been a very short time. I mean, we estimate that the car was on the parade route approximately 3 to 4 minutes. So we're talking a very short amount of time for all of this contact.
Now, you indicated on direct examination that you reviewed video where you were able to see the vehicle then continuing past where you personally observed the vehicle yourself, correct?
That is correct.
And during that time, you saw that the driver did not drive on any sidewalks, is that correct?
That is correct.
The vehicle did not strike any other vehicles, correct?
That is correct.
The vehicle did not try to make any other vehicles get knocked over or roll into other vehicles or parade participants or spectators, correct?
I did not see a knock over any other vehicles.
In fact, there were times when the vehicle almost struck spectators and other parade participants but didn't hit them. Is that correct?
Could you ask the question again, please?
There was a time when the vehicle was driving in the open lane between the spectators on the sidewalk and the parade participants, correct?
Correct.
And at that time, the vehicle went around rather than striking a small child who was standing in the roadway, correct?
There are times that he avoided people, if that's what you're asking.
Now, as you were observing these videos that you obtained throughout the parade route, is there consistent video of the rear of the vehicle?
What do you mean by consistent?
Can you often see the rear of the vehicle in watching these videos, or are you looking more like down from up or toward the front of the vehicle?
I'd say it's a split between that, but you can see the vehicle, the rear of the vehicle multiple times.
How many times?
I would have to review the reports to know that.
Now, you indicated on direct examination that you observed in these videos each of the 6 people who suffered fatal injuries. Is that correct?
I'd show that the video show 5 of the 6 people being struck.
Okay. And so I guess let's start with on direct examination, Attorney Opper asked you about the first person who was struck, who was with the REMAX group, correct?
Correct.
And so that person was near the area of the 200 block of Main Street. Is that correct?
Correct.
And where is that exactly? What's like a...
Between Barstow and Gasper Street.
Okay, thank you. And there were other people around that person there were other people in the vicinity of that single person who was struck and killed, correct?
Correct.
And not everybody who was in that vicinity died at that time, correct?
There's only 6 people that died out of hundreds.
Okay. On direct examination, you talked about the Blazers baseball team in the area of 264 West Main Street, correct?
Correct.
And you described that the Ford Escape was on one side of the road and then moved to the other side of the road, correct?
Correct.
In fact, the vehicle swerved around another truck that was in the parade, correct?
It went around a truck.
Okay. And on the left side of that truck was where the parade participants were walking, correct?
There were parade participants on both sides of the truck, but the one that was struck and killed was on the left-hand side of the truck.
Okay. And it was relatively close to the truck, is that correct?
Correct.
You talked about the group of participants in the parade with the Catholic community of Waukesha, correct?
Correct.
And in your direct examination, you indicated that that was a large group of people participating in the parade, correct?
Correct.
And you said that there were about 19 people who were injured as part of that group, correct?
Correct.
None of those people died, correct?
That is correct.
Ultimately, the driver of the vehicle was arrested, you said, at somewhere on Elizabeth
You
Street.
talking about Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
Yes.
You identified him as Darrell Brooks, correct?
Correct.
And was it you who took him into custody or a different officer?
Other officers.
He spent then a period of time with officers after being arrested, correct?
Correct.
And at that point, one of the officers who spent time with him reported an odor of marijuana about his person, correct?
Correct.
In fact, that officer reported that Mr. Brooks had red, bloodshot, glassy eyes, correct?
Correct.
And he could smell an odor of burnt marijuana on him, correct?
Correct.
And then one of the officers, or a couple of the officers, I think, attempted to interrogate Mr. Brooks. Is that correct?
That is correct.
That was not you, though, correct?
That is correct.
You reviewed reports of those other law enforcement officers who spoke with Mr. Brooks, correct? And those detectives showed Mr. Brooks photos and videos of this incident occurring. Is that correct?
Correct.
While those officers were showing Mr. Brooks photos and videos, he did not want to look at them. Is that fair to say?
That is fair to say.
In fact, he would put his head down, correct?
Correct.
He'd turn his head away from the photos and the videos. Is that correct?
Correct.
And at one point, he even begged the law enforcement officer to stop showing them to him, correct?
I believe so.
And lastly, Mr. Brooks indicated to one of the detectives that, quote, "I didn't mean to kill nobody," end quote. Is that correct?
I believe that's a quote.
I have nothing further.
Thank you. Attorney Apper, any redirect?
Just a couple quick follow-up. Detective Casey, on cross-examination, you were asked about, basically I'm going to summarize what I understood the cross-examination to be. You were asked about scenarios where it was implied that Mr. Brooks couldn't leave the parade route because it was blocked up and down both sides of the street by people at all times, or squads or something like that, correct?
Correct.
In fact, Mr. Brooks could have just simply stopped the car to avoid striking anybody or any object, correct?
Correct.
You were also asked about the fact that you personally were not run over or killed by Mr. Brooks' vehicle, correct?
That's correct.
And in fact, you had the benefit of facing the vehicle head-on, seeing it coming, and being able to react, correct?
Correct.
The other parade participants that were struck by Mr. Brooks did not have that same vantage point, did they?
That is correct. Speed is also important. That when I saw him, he was doing maybe 5 miles an hour. When he was at the west end of the route, he was maybe going 40 or 50 miles an hour. There's a big difference from where he started to where he ended.
Okay. And fair to say, if he was under the influence of marijuana at the time of these events and operated a vehicle and struck somebody and injured them, that would be a felony offense as well, correct?
Correct.
All right, thank you. I don't have anything else.
Thank you. Detective, you may step down. Thank you. Attorney Apper, any other witnesses?
No, sir, the state would rest.
Thank you. Attorney Keys, any witnesses?
No witnesses, defense rests.
Thank you. Any argument from the state, please?
The state will move for bind over without argument, Your Honor.
Thank you. Attorney Keys?
Your Honor, defense objects to bind over.
Thank you. Pursuant to what the law is, my decision on whether or not the state has presented sufficient evidence to show that the defendant probably committed a felony or felonies within the jurisdiction of the court, there is ample evidence on all fronts as far as each of the group of counts, the counts 1 through 6, counts 7 through 67, 63 or 68, strike that, through 73, and then the felony bail jumps 74, 75. Each of those were discussed. There is ample evidence on each of those to show, sir, that you probably committed a felony or felonies within the jurisdiction of this court, and based upon that, I am going to bind you over for trial. Attorney Keys, have you received a copy of the information?
Your Honor, we're requesting an arraignment date, and we previously obtained one with Madam Clerk.
Very good. And would you like that in front of this court or the trial court?
I think it's been scheduled in front of this court.
That's fine. So that date, Madam Clerk?
February 11th at 10:15 back here.
All right, and so we do have further housekeeping. There is now a second amended victim witness identification key. I'm modifying the bail bond condition originally set that Mr. Brooks, you may not disseminate any information regarding that particular identification key except to your lawyers. Then I did neglect, and I don't mean to get further into the bail issues, but I did mean to ask at our last bail hearing if Mr. Brooks possesses a passport.
No.
All right. If he does possess a passport, if he does post bail, I am ordering that that be turned over prior to being released to either the Sheriff's Department or the Clerk of Court's office, but I understand he does not, according to what he said. So anything else from the state?
Nothing else other than to request the prior condition of bail obviously required Mr. Brooks to have no contact with the victims.
Yes.
We would ask you to extend that to all of the victims now in the second amended victim key.
Thank you. And I unless you want to be heard on that, Attorney Keyes?
No.
I am going to grant that motion. So, Mr. Brooks, you may not have contact with any of the victims identified in the second amended victim witness identification key. And with that, unless there's anything else from the state before I get to any comment by any of the victims.
I was going to address that as well, Your Honor. So we are in full compliance with all victim rights notification, Your Honor. There are some victims that are present personally and some that are participating in the live stream viewing, but we have fully complied with them. It's my understanding that no one wishes to address the court on scheduling. At least that was the information I was provided at the beginning of the hearing, and I'm being told at this point that that's still the case. We did confer with the people who are present in the courtroom about that next court date of February 11th. Everybody who's here indicated that was an agreeable date. Certainly if we find out that there's an objection to that date from others that would require the court taking that issue up, we will alert the court and the defense. But right now we believe February 11th is agreeable to everyone, and nobody wishes to be heard further on scheduling, Your Honor.
And I'll recognize that your lead victim witness person is in the courtroom, and she was indicating to you that nobody wished to, as far as the victims, to be heard today.
Yes, correct.
Attorney Keyes, anything else?
No, Your Honor.
All right. So we have our date. We'll gather up again on that next court date back here for an arraignment. Unless there's anything further, we can be adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.